I always appreciated about my Uncle Clint was, he was, I recall him always being there. And I recall him always, never having to worry like I did with my dad. In my immediate, line of sight and what I recall, and maybe I was blinded by that because I was just so happy to be with my, have a family, have a bed, wake up, go to school, not necessarily have to worry about anything, right? It was great.
Jesse says the men in his family tended to be hard and have a short fuse.
But I don't remember my Uncle Clint like that at all. I mean, again, for me, the way that I look at my Uncle Clint was much like a savior.
Shine had a son named Adam. He was Jesse's older cousin. It took me a long time to track him down. One night, he finally agreed to speak by phone.
All right, Jake. Give me a second here.
He says that Shine was a jack of all trades, a salesman who sold cars and boats too, though Shine didn't talk about his work a ton.
He did keep his work and his family separate. He was a good guy, but he had an edge.
Shine was a striver. He was always looking for something beyond the working class suburb where they started out, a place called Melvindale, a town dominated by the nearby Ford, GM, and Chrysler plants.
Melvindale was, I call it a factory town. Pretty much everybody there worked for the big three. It was working class, good people, but he was kind of like taking me out of that environment, showing me that there was more. Like, you can achieve more. You don't have to just be a line worker all your life.
Adam had a lot of memories from that time, like when his dad came home with a new gadget, a mysterious briefcase filled with meters and electrical wires. The device was known as a PSE, which stood for Psychological Stress Evaluator. It was an alternative to the traditional lie detector, and it could be used discreetly, so it didn't require hooking the subject up to any wires or anything. Supposedly, a skilled operator could use it to pick up on micro tremors in your voice. I spoke to a lot of people who knew Shine and remembered vividly him showing up with his briefcase and testing them.
Oh, yes. Everybody took a test. Everybody.
There was a guy that always carried around this sort of big boxy briefcase, as I recall.
Oh, yeah, he could scare the hell out of it. Sure, he was a good bullshitter.
All a little nervous about taking this daggone thing. He asks you questions. I guess it works. He asks you what your name is, and you tell him. Then you tell him a lie. And so it gives them a distinction between the truth and lie.
Whether it works or not, it'd scare the shit out of you. So I imagine it would keep people straight. And I'm sure he was one of the most valuable tools they had, in doing this.
Shine had graduated from a special course, and now he was a trained PSE operator. He took it seriously, and Adam, like any kid, was curious.
So it was something different. It was interesting. I didn't know why he was doing it. I'm like, hey, cool, Dad's got a new job,
And the job came with perks. Like this one time, his dad took him on a business trip. They flew down to Houston, Texas together. They stayed at this cool hotel that was connected to a big shopping mall. And at some point, Shine tells his son,
he's like, hey, I got to go out for a little while. Don't leave the room. Don't answer the door.
Alone in his hotel room, Adam watched TV. Minutes turned to hours, and he began to think about what his dad had said. Don't answer the door. Why not? Who was it that might come knocking? Adam wasn't worried exactly, but he began to wonder, what was his dad up to?
But I think, maybe whoever he was working with, they had another room in the same hotel. So they could have been just down the hall. I don't believe he left. I think he just, grabbed his machine and, went to another room.
Adam didn't ask any questions, and he didn't give it too much thought at the time. But eventually he started to think back to moments like this and wonder, maybe what his father did was not entirely on the up and up. I mean, who was paying him to carry around that briefcase anyway? In fact, clues began to surface that Shine was much more than just a suburban dad with a mysterious job. One of these clues turned up 1,000 miles to the south, way down in Louisiana, on a lonely bayou, very far from Detroit. As Ned continued to investigate the bikers in Detroit, detectives in Louisiana were looking into a big smuggling job. It all began with a guy named Dave Ware.
Yeah, I was a helicopter pilot assigned to Louisiana State Police in our Region 2, Southwest Louisiana.
One day, Dave gets a tip about an abandoned barge, so he goes looking for it, flies up a lonely stretch of the Vermilion River, a 70-mile-long bayou in southern Louisiana.
It's flat. You got agricultural fields and then areas of heavy marsh and thick jungle type area.
So they were just choppering along.
We look down and we see this huge barge tied off with some rope next to some trees. And we're like, well, that's odd. And we were kind of scratching our heads of what to do. And I said, well, I'll just land on the barge, because it's like landing on an aircraft carrier.
So they land on the barge, they get out of the chopper, and they start poking around. And sure enough, they find a sealed hatch welded into the deck, hidden beneath some coils of rope.
And so I went to the cargo hull of my aircraft and dug in my little tool bag I always carried and got a screwdriver and started digging at this rubber sealant. And you got to imagine the sun was out and it was hot. And when I popped that sealant, it spewed just, moisture had come up and the smell of marijuana. And we looked at each other and smiled and said, bingo.
The barge itself was quite large and basically empty. All that remained were the dregs, some soggy bales that had somehow gotten wet at the bottom of the boat. Apparently, the rest of the load, totaling a few 100,000 pounds, had all been unloaded successfully, dry and ready to smoke. A narcotics agent named Roy Fruget took up the investigation.
So we walked on the barge and we saw marijuana seeds all over it. We looked through some drawers. We found a Panamanian flag. We found a Colombian flag. Well, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to realize that we stumbled upon something that was large in scale and that it was international.
Eventually, the agents figured out that a local marine contractor had been hired to move the barge up the river. And, as luck would have it, the contractors had a receipt with the customer's callback number on it.
Traced the callback number, and it went to a small grocery store in a rural area in Judice, Louisiana. And the name of the store was the Country Boy Grocery Store. So we went to the Country Boy Grocery Store, and I'm talking about a small building. It had a couple of gas pumps in front, had a small meat market inside. They specialized in Cajun food, like stuffed chickens, boudin, cracklings, that sort of thing. So we talked to the owner, because this guy's first language was Cajun French. And he said, with his accent, he said, in the last 3 months, there's been a lot of foreigners in my store. What do you mean by foreigners? He said, he said, out-of-towners, people with blonde hair and blue eyes and tan. He said, Florida-looking people.
So, turns out, these Florida-looking people had rented a couple of houses nearby. The agents got search warrants.
It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, ranch-style house. It was close to the Country Boy Grocery Store. And when we hit it, it had lots and lots of bunk beds, lots of beer bottles, lots of cans of beer, some of them half empty, half-eaten sandwiches on the floor. I remember one of my guys said it looked like a scene from Animal House.
Roy starts poking around the living room.
And on the coffee table, I saw a large red book, a hardbound New York Times World Atlas. I opened it up, started looking at it, looking actually for the Gulf of Mexico, saw that there was a chart with a pen marking places through the Gulf of Mexico, and then I backed it up and it went down to Barranquilla, Colombia.
It was, quite literally, mapped out in front of them. Evidence of an international syndicate with routes for smuggling tons of drugs into the United States. But everyone is gone. They don't have a single suspect. Roy and his partner, Harvey Duplantis, continued to search the house.
We found a yellow notepad with lines on it like you would use in school, and it didn't have any writing on it, but it had indentations where somebody had written on the page above it and then tore the page off. Harvey remembered from grade school, he took a number 2 pencil out of his truck and he scratched over the indentations, and we found a note. Of course, we didn't have the whole note, just whatever came up that Harvey could scribble out there. But it basically said he was bringing more people were on the way.
Harvey kneels over the table, carefully rubbing a pencil over the pad, deciphering this cryptic note word by word. The whole thing right out of a Hitchcock movie. This is exactly what Cary Grant does in North by Northwest. And it works. At the bottom of the pad, there's actually a signature. Someone wrote their name, as if authorizing these orders. And slowly, the letters of the name appear. S-H-I-N-E. Shine. Back in Detroit, Ned had no idea what had gone down in Louisiana. He was back at the office, doing a bit of good old-fashioned detective work, following up on that tip that Toby had given him about his brother. And the deeper Ned dug into Shine's life, the more he found.
We're looking at what he has, a house and cars and everything, and no source of income. And then we're pulling phone records, bank records, and everything, and huge deposits of, 50, 60,000 at a time. And we're getting travel records from credit cards.
And Ned says that those travel records were suspicious. For instance, Shine had spent some time down in the Cayman Islands, which was known as a money laundering hub. So, might Shine be his guy? The one Ned had been looking for? The key to it all? If Ned was right, he had found his link to a distant, shadowy drug network. But it didn't seem like he had quite enough to go on. Ned believed if he could just sit down with Shine, talk to him, man to man, he might be able to work him, maybe even flip him. He was starting to strategize, even though he didn't have much to threaten Shine with, except maybe his badge.
It sounds like you were doing some serious bullshitting of your own. And also, you could be barking up the wrong tree. You don't know for sure the magnitude or the, right?
It's part of the game, yeah. The FBI knows a lot, but a lot of it is a game to try to ferret out the information you need. When you throw down the FBI badge and credentials, it horrifies guilty people. They think the FBI knows everything.
Next time, on Deep Cover, Ned goes to flip Shine.
Shine had a family, and he was really a devoted family guy. I'm going to take every penny they got. I'm going to take the house. I'm going to take the cars. I'm going to take the bank accounts. Everything's going to be gone. And that struck a dagger in him.
Deep Cover is produced by Jacob Smith and edited by Karen Shakurji. Our story editor is Jack Hitt. Original music and our theme was composed by Luis Guerra, and Flawn Williams is our engineer. Fact-checking by Amy Gaines. Mia Lobel is Pushkin's executive producer. Ned's novel is read by Walton Goggins. Special thanks to Julia Barton, Heather Fain, Carly Migliori, Lital Malad, Maya Koenig, Eric Sandler, Aggie Taylor, Khadija Holland, Zooey Gwen, and Jacob Weisberg at Pushkin Industries. Special thanks also to Jeff Singer at Stowaway Entertainment. I'm Jake Halpern.
This is an iHeart podcast.